Hello, my name is David Hart. As the new CEO of the Bermuda Business Development Agency, it is my pleasure to be in Bermuda to welcome you to the third annual 2021 Bermuda Virtual Tech Summit. The purpose of the BDA is to promote and protect sustainable and equitable economic growth and prosperity in Bermuda. And we do this in collaboration with our strong partners in government and the private sector. Our strategies are multifaceted and nimble, but our primary goals are to support and expand existing sectors of strength and to identify, attract, and grow exciting new business opportunities for Bermuda. Of course, the development of cutting-edge new technologies that can create new efficiencies, expand the universe of opportunities, enhance our lives, and change the world is as exciting as new business opportunities get. Over the next 3 days, you will hear world-leading experts describe why Bermuda is the best jurisdiction in the world to beta test new tech. Please visit our website, bda.bm, to learn more about the Bermuda Business Development Agency and how we can connect you to industry professionals, regulatory officials, and key contacts to help turn your tech ideas into reality. It is now my pleasure to introduce the opening session of the 2021 Virtual Bermuda Tech Summit, From Tall Ships to Digital Assets, Bermuda's Journey to Becoming a Blockchain Nation, featuring Bermuda's Premier, the Honorable David Burt, and Michael Del Castillo, Associate Editor, Crypto and Blockchain at Forbes. This engaging and enlightening discussion highlights how innovation is in the island's DNA and how for hundreds of years, Bermuda has enjoyed an oversized impact on the global economy. On behalf of the entire BDA team, once again, welcome and enjoy the summit.
Good morning. Thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I'd like to start off by introducing our honorable guest this morning, the Honorable E. David Burt, JPMP Premier of Bermuda. Thank you so much for joining us today, Premier.
Good morning, Michael, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. I think one of the things I'm really excited about our conversation is the opportunity to address a really global audience from what I think is a really important local perspective. We've seen over the past couple years, leaders of nations around the world start to take blockchain seriously and other applications of technology that you and your nation have really helped lead the way to adopting. But what we don't get to see is really that leadership perspective. And I'm really excited to have that opportunity. But I think a side effect of addressing a global audience is not everybody knows Bermuda as well as you do. So I do want to take just a moment and go back in time just a little bit. And if you could kind of walk us through a little bit of sort of some of the history of what has driven Bermudan economics over the years.
Thank you. Bermuda, being an island in the middle of the Atlantic, has always had to be innovative in order to survive. And throughout our history, whether it was the construction of the Bermuda rigs, whether or not it was the change of the agricultural landscape, the conversion of our war infrastructure into a tourism infrastructure, or the leveraging of our relationships and our ability to be innovative to design the future of insurance, and now what we hope to be the future of digital assets. We've always had to innovate, and innovation is in our blood because we have to always be creative in order to survive when you're 700 miles away from the nearest landmass.
Good transition there. So being 700 miles away from the nearest landmass gave Bermuda the opportunity to be particularly innovative in one area. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of tall ships and maybe one of the innovations in the tall ship space that Bermuda is most famous for?
Well, I would say certainly the Bermuda rig, but where it comes from is the fact that there were problems that needed to be solved. It was where we were, the ability to be very quick, speedy to deal with the weather elements that were. And Bermuda rig with the triangle sails was just something that was able to be better and more efficient than other things that were out there. And so that's just the way that competition works, and it allowed us to solve a unique problem in the global supply chains at that time. Bermuda established itself as a trading post because of the fact that we were able to innovate with the ways of transportation and the design of the Bermuda rig.
Wonderful. Thank you, Premier. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about yourself and sort of what you were doing before you came into the extraordinary position that you have right now. So help us kind of just set the scene. What were you doing before? And how do you think that sort of prepared you to be one of the first leaders of a nation to sort of take some of these big technological steps?
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm fortunate to be a tech geek by background. And so my life since I graduated from university with my master's in information systems design in 2003 has been all about IT. So I was an IT consultant building various applications for the public and for the private sector. And then my last thing that I did before I came into this job is continuing to work is that we founded a company, which a few people are going to know, Hitch Bermuda, which is basically Bermuda's version of Uber, if you want to call it, to allow people to hail taxis through their mobile phones. So that has been my history. And that was basically the last thing that I was able to do before I became in this role. So 2016, when I was appointed leader of the opposition, I actually stepped away from my private companies to dedicate full time into the work of politics. And so that was what I was doing before. How has it prepared me? I would say that technology is fun. I enjoy it. I like it. But my particular focus in technology and in the work that I did in grad school was requirements analysis and design. And it gives you a unique perspective into how to approach problems, how to deconstruct problems, and to make sure that you're actually solving the problem that needs to be solved. And I think that, it's part of the things in which when we talk about blockchain and others, it's about making sure you actually recognize and understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So that, in addition to the fact that I was a certified project manager and was doing implementation on IT projects, I think that stood me in good stead for a life, certainly in politics, because those skills are transferable.
I'm glad you mentioned that concept of this seemingly simple but very deceptive concept of recognizing the problem. There are not many national leaders with your tech background, if any. I'm not sure about that. And I would say even those that have prioritized becoming familiar with technology, it's not native to them. They really have to try. When you think about the qualities that lead to a country being adept at adopting technology like this, how important is it that the leadership itself be technologically literate?
I'm not entirely certain if it's that important, to be honest. I think what's important is that leaders can actually understand the various perspectives of which are put to them. I certainly think that it's an advantage. There's no question about it. I can have a conversation with teams, technology teams around the world who are looking to do business in Bermuda, and I can actually understand the language in which they're speaking. So, I mean, that makes it easier. When acronyms will come or something else, they don't have to rewind and break it down, and I can understand concepts. So I think it's certainly an advantage, but I don't think that it's necessarily required. I think that any
it helps, but make sure you hire good talent.
Without question.
Good, awesome. So let's talk. I mean, obviously, Bermuda's economy is very diverse. You touched on a little bit of the historical economics, and I'd like to kind of transition a little bit into how your plans emerged to sort of modernize Bermuda's economy. So I don't know. Would you say that you when you became premier, was blockchain already on the agenda, or was that something that sort of evolved later? And if you could maybe kind of let's start there. Sort of what was the inspirational moment that led you to see opportunity there?
Oh, thank you for that. When we were in opposition prior to our election, we had laid out a vision for the country, Vision 2025. And one of the planks and pillars in that was the development of fintech in Bermuda, in addition to other things. And that had come from my predecessor as leader of the PLP, who was very involved and wanted to make sure we went ahead and pushed that forward. When we came into office, that was part of the work which we wanted to do, was to modify. And it was just coincidental that I think in the first weekend or second weekend after I was elected, there was a retreat that was happening in Bermuda, which was put together by a Bermuda company called Home Culture. But they were there programming on the beach, and they were at Aerial Sands, and they were just working through, what type of technology solutions can we build. And I remember going there; it was refreshing after having campaigned for 50 days, and to go sit down and kind of geek out with tech people and, and talk about things. But at that point in time, there were discussions which came after that, where persons there were involved in the growing and emerging digital asset industry, and they said that Bermuda can play a role because this industry is growing, but there is no place currently that is actually dealing with effective regulation of this industry. And so that led us to set up our regulatory a task force in, I want to say, November of 2017, and then led us to be able to introduce legislation in May of 2018 for the Digital Asset Business Act.
And there's been a lot of skeptics that have thrown around the idea that the underlying blockchain technology, as well as the cryptographic applications built on top of it, whether or not it's cryptocurrency or crypto securities or crypto stocks and bonds, whatever the case might be, are the doubters out there say it's a problem looking for a solution. I'm sorry, a solution looking for a problem. What would you say, what was the opportunity in Bermuda? I don't know if you want to talk about it in terms of the problem, but maybe it was a problem. Like, what were you seeing on the ground in Bermuda that as you were hearing these people talk about digital assets and blockchain, you're like, aha?
Well, I think that's two different parts of the question. The problem that Bermuda is solving is the space for regulation of digital assets. That's the problem. The problem that was put to us was that there is no place in the world that is adequately regulating these assets. We want to bring them to the space where they're institutional. We believe they have an opportunity. And in our discussions with our regulator and industry, it was accepted that that was something that was a gap in the global marketplace and a space that Bermuda could fill. So that was the problem of which we were solving. What I would say is that on the issue which you raised, I think that yes, there are a lot of blockchain solutions that are looking for problems. And I think that's part of the ammunition that can be given to skeptics. Not everything requires a blockchain solution. You have to understand what blockchain is about. And so that to find out whether or not it's necessary, because it is not, in its time, especially 2017, 2018, now it's becoming a little bit more efficient. But back then, it was not very efficient. It could have been very clunky. And it's what are the applications of which it can be used for. So as time goes on, remember, it's a very nascent technology. It's becoming better and better and better. However, we just have to understand that not every solution requires, and every IT solution for every problem, requires a blockchain solution. There are things that work well, and there are things that traditional applications will be just fine.
Well put, thank you. One of the things that I think we would be remiss not to talk a little bit about was the seeming agility with which your regulators managed to create this environment. We're still hearing complaints of major big countries all over the world and smaller, more nimble companies around the world that have not been able to implement, in many cases, any regulation bringing clarity, and in other cases, not sufficient regulation bringing clarity. Now, not to say that Bermuda's regulation is perfect and that it doesn't have any holes in it. But so far, we've seen indications that it's providing that clarity that entrepreneurs are looking for. What's the secret there? Right? Like, that's basically what I want to get to. How the heck did you guys do that?
Well, I mean, I could be funny and say they don't have what we have, leaders who understand technology, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to go there because it's not just about me. It's about the Bermuda story, and it's about why we do what we do so well. And it's as I call, some people may call it slightly sacrilegious, but as I call it the Holy Trinity of Bermuda, or another way to call it, you can call it Bermuda Triangle.
Okay.
And it's the government, industry, and regulator working together to identify problems and then to come up with solutions. So industry presented a problem in this way and circumstance. They came to the government with the problem. The government examined the problem, said, "Oh, this is something that we felt could be something that we can address." The government then goes to the regulator and says, "This is something that the government has put forward, that industry has put forward. Is this something that you think makes sense from a regulatory framework?" If the regulator says yes, then the government goes back, starts to go and draft legislation around it in consultation with industry and with input from the regulator to make sure that we have a regulatory and create a regulatory framework that works. And so that's the way that we do it. And that's the way that we continue to upgrade our infrastructure. So, for instance, that was the base level of the Digital Asset Business Act in 2018. In 2019, there were additional changes that were made to the Digital Asset Business Act because there were new things that came up, such as crypto derivatives. How do you do that? And it's the same thing. Industry will say this is something that our clients are looking for and wondering whether or not this can be accommodated under our regulatory infrastructure. Government looks at it, examines as to whether or not this is something that fits, has that conversation with the regulator, and then goes ahead and drafts legislation to put forward to the parliament in order to put those things in place. So it's that those three particular parts that play a very important role. But that's the same thing we've done in insurance, and it's the same thing we'll do in digital assets.
Thank you for mentioning insurance there. That we have sort of teased at the idea that by no means is Bermuda becoming a blockchain primary nation. In essence, this is still, as you put it, a nascent infrastructure technology at the foundation of, or potentially at the foundation of, any industry that requires the movement of value. Can you kind of help me understand a little bit, sort of how this infrastructure might, in someday in the future, connect to these other industries like insurance, or currently does? Give us an idea of that process.
I mean, Michael, I would love to say that I can get to the technical details. I won't be able to. But what I can say is that there's no question from the insurance perspective of this, there's two parts to it. Number one, when you're talking about the digital asset industry itself, there is certainly a need for insurance, and Bermuda can solve those problems. When there is a need to manage risk, Bermuda is the risk management capital of the world. So we can certainly solve the problems based around risk when it comes to cryptocurrencies. But what I think is also important on a broader uh, space, you can see how the very use of blockchain can assist in some problems and challenges with insurance. Because insurance, of course, when it comes to verify things, when it comes to verify claims, it's all a question of trust. And there's a number of things that can be done through blockchain applications that can actually make some of the processes in insurance work better. And our companies are examining those. We have insurtech startups that are focused on blockchain based insurance and making sure they apply that. So I think that it's two sides to the coin. There's a side that we can support the digital asset industry with insurance products. And there's also insurers that are building their business models based upon blockchain, distributed ledgers, and how that can actually work to make insurance that we've made incredibly efficient in Bermuda, possibly even more efficient.
What about on the retail and individual level? I'm not sure if you're there yet, but are there opportunities for local businesses, whether or not it's in the guise of accepting, spending crypto, other applications that I might not even think of? But we've been talking sort of about very big industries here. On the smaller, more local business level, are you exploring that space at all?
Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, there's this thing that's happened that last 18 months, I'll call it a pandemic, which has thrown the wrench into many governments' plans. And so we would have hoped to have had it launched already. But one of the things in which we are key in doing is driving local adoption. And so there's two ways in which we are dealing with driving local adoption. The first is learning from the lessons of the insurance industry. The insurance industry itself was persons who came into Bermuda, brought capital to Bermuda, built on Bermuda platform, and through no fault of their own, which is part of the way it was done, became incredibly wealthy and successful. Now, that's something that's good, but what I want to ensure is that when it comes to digital asset space, that you don't have to, unlike in insurance, where you're starting an insurance company, you might have to bring billions of dollars of capital. When you're talking about building in the digital asset space, you might not have to bring billions of dollars of capital. You may be able to just build a product that can work very well. And so that's the way in which we're trying to get Bermudians involved. And so in our licensing regime, we had three different types of licenses. Or before, we had two types of licenses. We had a big full license, and then we had a sandbox license. What we found is that companies who may have just been small, who were trying to figure out, found it difficult to meet that level of getting to the sandbox license due to the fact that our regulator, which it should be, is very rigorous. So recognizing a problem, solving a problem, we introduced a new licensing tier called a test license. And the test license is accessible. It costs $1,000. And it allows persons to get in line with the BMA to build products and services so we can have locals developing applications that can work and be regulated under the Bermuda Monetary Authority framework. Test them out, get a little better, and then they can graduate to a higher licensing framework. We're also launching a local stimulus token, Bermuda dollar-based stimulus token, which we're going to use in our economic empowerment zones. And that is going to allow retailers to start to accept local-based Bermuda dollar stablecoins, and that will be launching in November.
Exciting. And I do want to talk about some of the specific tech innovations that have kicked off in Bermuda. But before we get to those specifics, I do want to spend just a minute or two here sort of dwelling on this concept that regulators are supposed to protect their constituents. And a lot of nations regulators have taken the position that the best way to protect their citizens is to not let them have access or exposure to these new assets. And we're seeing where some of the more risky, more imaginative assets are only available to so-called accredited investors, folks that might have a minimum dollar amount in their savings account or some other experience that the regulator deems them as qualifying to take these risks. Where has Bermuda fallen in this this balancing act between allowing for innovative assets to be offered to its citizens while simultaneously also protecting them from the scams that might be out there or just general ignorance of how the technology works?
Certainly in new industries, there will always be scammers around. And it's important that those things get discerned. And so from the perspective that Bermuda engages in, the advice of which, and from the government's perspective, what we only do is that we try to only either promote, associate ourselves with, do things with companies that have been through our licensing process. That was not always our stance, and we have been affected by that. And so we now take the approach that we have a Bermuda Monetary Authority that has the ability to go ahead and examine the business models, examine the backgrounds, know and make sure that what is being put forward actually makes sense and can protect consumers, and then go through that process. So I think that that's the important approach. But the issue of which you said in regards to, only accredited investors can invest big sums of money. I mean, I not to be too impolite, but that's just a big scam. And that's just the way for the rich to get richer. And I think that what you'll see is the democratization of finance, the opportunities which are going to be presented by digital assets and the different types of things in which you can do. It will allow persons who did not have access to certain things before to have that level of access now. And I think that that's important, to allow people to get on the ground floor, to allow people to make and take their own risk. Yes, there must be regulation to ensure there are not bad actors that are manipulated, that are causing persons to be defrauded. Absolutely. But I don't believe that, you should get in the space of, for instance, government bonds are only available to people who can put up $25,000. Why can't government bonds be available for someone who wants to put up $250 if that's all they have? But blockchain allows that to happen, and it eliminates the risk. Sorry, not the risk, but the friction insofar as setting up all of those various things. And those are the things that are particularly exciting about where this comes. So I think of the opportunities for regular citizens to be able to engage in financial transactions and have access to things that that in the past only large persons had access to. And the way that markets work, that means that pricing will get better for all. It will make the economy more efficient. And I think that that's the promise of where the digital assets and blockchain future will take us to.
So for regulators around the world who have opted to protect their constituents, I'm going to put the word protect in air quotes here.
It's not protect. They're doing something else. It's not protect.
They have opted to protect their constituents. To
be honest, it's to protect. If we're talking about China, at the risk of upsetting the PRC, I mean, it is about making sure that they can keep together their financial system, which blockchain is the antithesis of control. It is decentralization. It is something that people who sit in chairs like mine should have a reason to fear if the view is to have control of your citizenry. But if the view is to allow and empower your citizenry to make decisions that they can make with the transferring of value and other things, that is empowering the basis of a free society. And I think that that is something that should be celebrated. So I think some of the moves of which we're seeing, I'm going to put the US in a different category, but I think some of the moves of which we're seeing in other places is because it is the same reason that you censor the internet in some places, because the internet is the free flow of data. The blockchain networks and the internet is the free flow of value. And sometimes you want to constrain the free flow of value for whatever reason you may want to. And I just don't believe that that is the best way to go. The United States is a different perspective. The United States' perspective is that, we have specific laws and specific things and all the rest. And if you can't abide by these laws, you can't go ahead and have access, to our country. And they have the power to do that. And that makes sense. So I don't think that it's the exact same way as you'll see in China or other places. But I do believe that what the United States is going to do is to miss out on innovation. But let me say this. Bermuda is open for the innovators who want to be innovators. And we have already been open. And we have seen the companies come because they want to be able to deal with a regulator that knows and understands this. And we are determined to build the future here. This digital asset industry is going to change so much of which we've done. The ability to freely and quickly exchange value for anything, to capture value of anything, which couldn't be done before, is going to revolutionize the way in which we work. The example that I gave, that I always give to someone so they can actually get it, I say, imagine you're riding a pedal cycle. The pedal cycle which you're riding creates energy. With blockchain and with trusted systems, you can have a battery on your pedal cycle that is capturing the energy at which you are accumulating and go home and plug it into the grid and get credit for that. Now, that's a minuscule amount. It might be, 2 or 3 cents. It doesn't matter. The fact is, in any other application, that would have made nonsense because a human being would have had to be involved in that interaction to verify it, all the rest. It just would have made sense. But in a distributed way of transferring of value, that can happen. That's just a small amount, but it can happen in lots of other places and lots of other ways. And that's something that is incredible.
So I want to get to those companies that you're starting to see arrive as a result of some of your policies. But before we do that, I just want to kind of try to draw a stark difference here between what I'll call regulation through banning, as opposed to regulation through what? I mean, what's the alternative? How would you describe sort of the other alternative if you're not protecting your citizens by banning something? What are some other ways that you can protect a citizenry while still also allowing them access to these innovative assets and other products?
Well, in Bermuda, we don't have, I would say, the size and scope as other countries like the United States do to go after actors who might be offering services in Bermuda. And so what we encourage our citizens to do, and anyone comes to me and says, oh, I want to, buy crypto, all the rest, I refer them to one of our licensed crypto persons, our licensed crypto companies. And so from that perspective, we have exchanges here that are on island. And we go ahead and I say, look at the ones that we have. Bittrex offers a wonderful service here. You can go ahead and sign up and go ahead and trade crypto, and it works. And the fact is, if you have an issue, you can either go to the offices here locally or you can go to the BMA. You can't do that with places, with companies that are not registered in Bermuda. There's other companies like Circle, which is offering a yield product out of Bermuda. Now that's for business, that's not for individuals. But we also have companies like Stablehouse, associated with XBTO, who have already launched a yield product from Bermuda as well. So there are incredible things which are happening. And so I am excited for the fact that our citizens are going to be able to be exposed to that. And that is where we're trying to do, to show our citizens the power of how this technology can benefit and empower their lives. So in my view, it's not about banning, it's about making sure you say, these are the companies of which we vetted that you can trust. If you decide to use someone else and you lose your money, that's on you.
Yeah.
If you use these ones, you can trust these ones and you can come back to us if you have a problem. And I think that's the best way to go about those things.
I love it. So normally as a reporter, I would hate the idea of a product plug, but I do think that occasionally a product is historic and newsworthy. And I think, can we safely call the Circle and Bittrex products first? So is that the first time a jurisdiction has approved them, or are there others out there? At very least, this is early days. Could you kind of walk me through a little bit? What is it exactly that Circle and Bittrex have done, and how rare or unique is this?
Well, I think that it's from a regulated environment. So whether it's Circle, whether it's Bittrex, whether it's Stablehouse, whether it's other companies that are doing these type of things. I mean, Circle and Stablehouse are doing something similar. It's a yield product. And so with Circle, it's a commercial yield product where you can deposit USDC and you can earn a yield. But the thing is that there are many yield products that exist in the world. But the question is whether or not you have a yield product that is regulated by an international reputable regulator. And that's the thing, who is verifying that this is going to work, this is stable, we can verify from a prudential standpoint and the risk, et cetera, it can work. So from the Circle's perspective, well, they said it was the first regulated crypto high yield product in the world. And that's what's important, because our monetary authority is actually regulating these things. From the Bittrex perspective, this was, and I think it's important to note on the Circle side, with a regulated yield product, there's also other companies such as Stablehouse, which are also launching regulated yield products out of Bermuda. So, I myself personally have a Stablehouse account, and you can deposit your USDC into a Stablehouse account and earn yield on that, a significant amount of yield. I don't know what the check was, but I think it's like 12%. So I mean, that's huge. It's those type of things which are huge. And so from the perspective of Bittrex, I think the Bittrex thing was the regulated security token offering, or tokenized stocks, not security tokens, but tokenized stocks, where there were many different types of stocks. So if you want to buy Amazon and you don't want to, go on the regular networks and do it, you can go into Bittrex and, take USDC or Tether or Bitcoin or whatever other thing you may have in Bittrex through that exchange, and go ahead and say, I want to, buy 0.1 Amazon stock. And you can go ahead and do that through the tokenized stocks, which they have. And that's something that is regulated. And again, that is the democratization of finance. Before, if you wanted to buy a piece of a company, you had to go through certain things. Now, through a Bermuda company, you can do it very quickly and simply.
And to be clear, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the Bermuda Monetary Authority that's kicking the tires on this technology, right? Like, they're the ones that are getting in there and doing the analysis. Okay, absolutely. Great. So to your knowledge, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Premier. Did you want to say something?
No, all I'm saying is, and that's the way in which we like to approach it. And that's why I will tell my friends or colleagues who will say things. I said, use a company that's regulated under Bermuda Monetary Authority. I can vouch for them. I can't vouch for anyone else, but I can vouch for companies regulated by our Bermuda Monetary Authority.
So to your knowledge, has the Bermuda Monetary Authority been approached by other regulators? I can only imagine if I were a regulator in a different jurisdiction, perhaps considering some of the same stuff, one of the first things I would do would be go give a phone call to the folks that have already done this. Are you doing, as far as you know, is the Monetary Authority having these conversations? Have other regulators approached you guys, or are they really so far behind that we're not there yet?
I wouldn't say they're so far behind. I would say that that in early on in the days, other countries approached us to find out what it is that we were doing. I know that our regulator, specifically because our regulator is just really good. So even before there were the international rules by the Financial Action Task Force on the type of risks that you should be analyzing for on a money laundering basis for digital assets, we had already had that completed. So when they released their rules, the Bermuda Monetary Authority had already exceeded those rules. I mean, the regulations in Bermuda have been cited in testimony in front of the United States Congress in the House Financial Services Committee on examples of how to regulate digital assets. And so lots of countries have looked at what we've done, and many countries have copied what we've done. And in my view, that's not a bad thing, because what we are talking about, if you're talking about it from a purely selfish basis, then you're saying we want every company in Bermuda, we want everyone here, we want all the business. That's not reality. That's not going to work. The more around the world these technologies can become and find homes, I think the better it will be for society, because it will make society more efficient due to the more efficient transfer of value. And I think that's only something to benefit. So yes, lots of companies have copied our legislation, and we don't particularly have an issue with that, because we will continue to enhance our regulatory framework. Other companies may copy our legislation, but the one thing they do not have is the excellent and stellar record of our Bermuda Monetary Authority.
Great. Other than the yield and securities products that we've already discussed, I know that there are actually many or multiple other applications of blockchain technology in various stages of being developed. Given our limited time, is there one that you'd like to highlight, either because it recently crossed a milestone that you think is interesting, or it's particularly mature? I'm not exactly sure what would stand out to you, but could you maybe pick one of the applications and just kind of briefly give us a little bit of a tease of some of the other stuff that's going on around the country?
Well, I think we're involved in discussions with a number of particular players, but I think the most important thing to do is to recognize that what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a base. We're trying to make sure that we have how would I put it, a critical mass of companies that are inside the ecosystem that will only continue to make that ecosystem grow. So whether it's applications in which we're looking at to deal with medical records, to deal with making sure that medical transfers can work more efficiently, talk about the incredible administration which takes place inside of healthcare administration. And if we can find a way to reduce that amount of friction, that means that you can reduce the costs of healthcare provisioning inside the country, which is a huge benefit. Those are items in which we are certainly progressing on and advancing. If you take a look at just verifiable credentials overall, we introduced verifiable credentials for our vaccination certificates. If you look at introducing verifiable credentials to other types of industries, and then you don't need a blockchain-based solution for a single verifiable credential, but blockchain works well linking multiple different credentials together. When you start linking multiple different credentials together, the efficiencies that can be gained from that are immense and only begin to scratch the surface. So right now, the example is always that, you have to present multiple pieces of ID in multiple different places. If you have that identity and you can use blockchain as trust to tie your driver's license, your business license, your house license, your this license, when you go to the bank, all you have to do is give them your code and they can have access to all the information readily available, which prevents you from having to go through that over and over again. And that's what we're focusing on, making sure we build at a base level between digital identity and making sure we tie in various verifiable credentials. It's that way that we can continue to build, I think, and and demonstrate in the local sphere how this technology actually works well for people.
You had previously mentioned the stimulus token, but it's such a fascinating concept. I do think we should dwell on it a little bit longer. So first of all, if you could just explain what is the stimulus token? Where is it in its development? Is this something that's ready to launch tomorrow? And what will it do when it does launch?
Well, I've seen the app. So the app is, I'm not sure if I should say this, it's in the App Store, but it's kind of like in pre-tests and all the rest.
Cool.
But what it is, it's to make sure for local adoption of blockchain. Blockchain is just, oh, what's that? Oh, crypto, what's that? It doesn't necessarily mean something. If you can't have it, if you can't spend it, if you can't buy food, if you can't do something to it, it is an abstract concept. It's not real. And what we're trying to do is get it to a place where we can take money to put inside of stimulus tokens to give to 1,000 Bermudians, say, hey, we're going to give you $100. And there's 50 places where you can go and spend this $100. And that actually starts to get people thinking about how this stuff actually works. Get them used to it. Learn how to scan a QR code here, accept a QR code here. That's what we're trying to do. So it's about getting local adoption. So that's what this is all about. So there's money that the government will put into it, give that money to citizens. Those citizens can spend it. We're starting it at Bermuda College for our students that are at Bermuda College. We can have some vendors at the Bermuda College in addition to vendors in our economic empowerment zone. And that will allow persons to actually understand how this technology works and then to spend it. But it also piques the interest, especially at our students at Bermuda College, of how can these applications work? And we're also combining that with how to build applications in crypto, how to get involved, what are the types of things in which you need to know. So that's the basis of the program. It's to make sure that we are having more local adoption here in Bermuda of cryptocurrency so that stores know how to accept it and people know how to spend it.
And just to clarify, the stimulus token, are we talking about a central bank digital currency that can be spent anywhere in the world? Are we talking about more like a coupon that can be spent at certain locations? If you could just kind of be a little more specific there as
Michael,
to, can it be spent anywhere?
All those things are the same thing, by the way.
Okay.
All those things which you discuss, they're all the same thing.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, does it matter if it's a central bank digital currency? Does it matter if it's this? Does it matter if that? The only thing that matters is you can have something, you can pay for something, and you can get something in return. And that's the transfer of value. So I think it's important from that perspective. Bermuda is not going to be introducing a central bank digital currency. We have no desire whatsoever to do that. Our strategy is based on the fact that many people issue central bank digital currencies, but at the end of the day, they have to be interoperable. So what we're focused on is what comes after that. So what the government of Bermuda has stated is that any company that is regulated by the Bermuda Monetary Authority that issues a one-to-one or fully backed, fully reserved stablecoin, whether it be US dollars or Bermuda dollar stablecoin, the government of Bermuda will accept that stablecoin for payment of goods and services in Bermuda. That's the way in which you put it. So where other countries may have said, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No, that's just the basis of the level because it's about transactions. It's about how do you easily transact and make sure that you can reduce I would say, the friction of monetary transactions inside the economy. So from that perspective, it is going to be a Bermuda dollar-based stablecoin.
And so to be clear, there has been some concern that governments might be able to restrict how we spend our money by writing smart contracts that restrict where our funds are available at. The stimulus token that you're preparing to launch, will that be restricted in any way, or is this kind of open legal tender anywhere that there's a business in Bermuda?
Well, that's a very good point to which you raise. So one of the concerns about a centralized central bank digital currency is that the government, because it's a program of money, can program how it's used, can program how it's tracked, all the rest. That is not the direction of where Bermuda is going. So at this point in time, what we're dealing with is the stimulus token is it can be spent anywhere where individuals have it. Now, in the future, the government may want to say, oh, well, we have a financial assistance program where we deliver financial assistance. There's already restrictions on how financial assistance money is spent inside of supermarkets. And so if we're giving people $500 a month for food, and that $500 a month for food, they're not allowed to spend that money on alcohol or cigarettes, you can then program that money in the future to make sure that it's not spent on alcohol and cigarettes. But we're not there yet. So that's an example of programmable money in the future. But insofar as a stimulus token, no. But the key point of which you said is that central bank digital currencies, if they are centralized and issued, can in effect, be programmed to say you can't spend it here, there, anywhere, and that can actually lead to a more, in my view, dangerous form of central government control.
It could be a fun way for parents to control how their kids spend their allowance, though.
But I mean, they can do that now. You can do that now. There's different apps where, parents can load certain things. You can only spend it in a certain way. So you can always do it. That's based on fintech. You understand what I'm saying? And so the same thing can be enabled through blockchain throughout an entire economy that can make it far more efficient. So absolutely, it can happen. But I don't think that's where we are right now with our stimulus.
Last question. We recently saw what some people thought was exciting news and some people thought was kind of scary news about El Salvador making Bitcoin a legal tender. And I can't help but wonder with all this innovation, if Bermuda is going to be the next nation to do so. Any plans to make Bitcoin legal tender?
Happy to break news. Unfortunately, that is not part of our strategy. So no. And different countries may have different strategies, and that's fine. I don't believe there's any need to make Bitcoin legal tender. And I think that might have been more of a PR thing than something in reality. At the end of the day, this is all about flows of money. This is all about how you can transact money inside of an economy. And I think that the strategy that the Bermuda government has laid out so far is that we welcome any type of stable coin in Bermuda, as long as it's one-to-one backed by the U.S. dollar and or the Bermuda dollar, can work inside of our economy. And I think that's the direction to go. Whatever El Salvador has done, they've done, but Bermuda will not be in the near future adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. That's not part of our current strategy on how we want to approach innovation inside of this space.
Wonderful. Premier, I thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to continuing to follow your progress and seeing that story told for many years to come.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Michael. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope that our viewers and those in attendance are enjoying it as well.
Bye-bye.